Welcome back to another episode of Longevity by Design. In this episode, I interviewed Dr. John Oliffe, an expert on mental health. In this discussion, we talk about the many challenges regarding mental health faced by men in today's world. Dr. Oliffe shared how men present mental health symptoms differently than women, giving advice to partners and family members in order for them to better understand and help men in their life. Dr. Oliffe and I also talk about the biological and social reasons that men may experience poor mental health and how this can impact men's longevity. Dr. Oliffe offers great advice to men, teaching us how we can live healthier and longer by prioritizing our exercise and social life to optimize mental health. Please be aware that this episode of Longevity by Design includes sensitive topics including depression, anxiety, suicide, substance abuse, risk-taking, divorce, and domestic violence. This episode is intended to raise awareness of the warning sign of mental health disorders that men in particular may face. This discussion may be distressing or triggering for some of you. The Longevity by Design team has included mental health resources in the show notes. I think that this episode discussion will benefit men and anyone that have men in his or her life, and open up the conversation about men's mental health, which is often overlooked. Enjoy the discussion and don't forget to rate and review the podcast. Thank you.
Welcome to Longevity by Design, a podcast designed to give individuals access to the leading scientific information in the field of longevity. The ability to add years to your life and life to your years needs no opinion. Join us as we ask science to take the wheel. In each episode, Dr. Gil Blander joins a co-host and an industry expert in the field of longevity, shining a light and getting the answers to the key question: how can we live a longer, healthier life?
Hello, I'm Dr. Gil Blander. Welcome to Longevity by Design, how to live a longer, healthier life. We are produced by Inside Tracker, your science-based guide to optimize your body from the inside out. Our guest today is Dr. John Oliffe. Dr. John Oliffe is the founder and lead investigator of the University of British Columbia Men Health Research Program. Dr. Oliffe is also a professor and Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Men Health Promotion. His research focuses on masculinities as an influence of men's health, behavior, and illness management, as well as impact on parent, family, and overall quality of life. Findings drawn from his research offer guidance to clinical and researchers to advance men's health promotion in area of physiological prostate cancer care, male depression, suicide, and smoking cessation. Thanks for being here today, John.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to catch up and have a chat.
Excellent. We always start the episode by understanding a bit more about your background and specifically how have you decided to become a scientist and why you have decided to focus on men's mental health. What was the reason for that?
Yeah, I think there was a few things that sort of influenced me. I come from a clinical background, so I'm a registered nurse by trade. I was a clinical nurse specialist and worked in the emergency room for 20 some years before all of this lofty academe and research came into play. And one of the things I noticed, in our clinical work was guys would often show up, diaphoretic, clutching middle chest and denying chest pain. And I was always a bit, worried about that and about where that behavior came from. I was quite intrigued. I'd also been exposed to a grandfather who died of prostate cancer, but had substance use issues along the way. As a young man, for me, I kind of was struck by the enormity of the challenges in and around his life. And so probably a combination of the professional and personal sort of experiences just led me to think more systematically about men's health and have influenced the last, 20 some years of research and the opportunity to move to the University of British Columbia and continue that work. So yeah, just lots of influences along the way. and still lots of questions about mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're interviewing you today, to learn more and get some insight inside that. So I would like to start with a statement that I'm sure that you are aware of. Today, the life expectancy of males in the US is around 74.5, while women's lifespan is around 80.2. So it's basically almost a 6 years difference in the life expectancy between males and females. And the question that I would like to ask you is, why do you think women live longer than men?
Yeah, it's interesting. If we think about the actual causes, and we can plot this, we can actually say that it's cardiovascular disease, it's suicide, it's motor vehicle accidents, and it's often liver failure as well as a fourth cause, most often secondary to alcohol use. And I think what's really interesting about, being able to attribute that life expectancy difference is all of those things to me seem like they're modifiable, and certainly, lifestyle and thinking about longevity. I think there's some things that kind of drive our research program too, that help us try and think about how we could intervene in a meaningful way to sustain change, behavior changes. And it's not to suggest that all those issues and death causes are purely social, but it is to say that, there are intervention moments that we can make a difference, notwithstanding some of the biologies and the cards we're dealt are tougher to modify, and can put us at risk. So just a combination. So it's a complex question, pretty simple answer. If we do focus on those social determinants of health with guys and those issues, we might be able to make a bit of a difference. And I'd just say pre-pandemic, we were starting to see a reduction in the life expectancy in terms of years difference between males and females. Yeah, I think COVID's kind of, ruptured some of that. But just to say that we were on the improved pre-2020 in terms of that number, that 5 and 6 year gap, dwindling down to 4 years, certainly in the Canadian context. So again, these are shifting constructs as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And are there some diseases that are more prevalent in males than women? So, for example, cardiovascular diseases or diabetes or any other, or maybe cancer, that's why males living shorter, or it's all over it's all around that always males have any disease that we have are more prevalent in male than female.
Yeah, I think that we could make the case that perhaps cardiovascular disease and diabetes afflict men at an earlier age. I wouldn't necessarily say more often than or more prevalent than women, but just maybe earlier. So, some of those things that sort of creep in early on in a man's life, or some of the stage setting, that's done in terms of behaviors and lifestyle issues, can be set up fairly early on. So just sort of saying, in terms of thinking about, exactly where those causative aspects lie, the sex differences are really interesting. But I think, for a lot of our work, we've focused on what the gender dimensions might be about some of those lifestyle issues that we might think about how we might intervene and make a bit of a difference to how guys do health and do help seeking as well.
Okay, thank you. One theory that I think that when we done the research about you, we found that there might be a reason that, or one cause that might be to influence the difference between males and females is that I see women as the chief medical officer of the house. They are always being sure that everything is okay, managing the family, but also managing themselves better and seek medical treatment, let's maybe earlier or more in a more accurate way than male. Is it something that you see in your research?
Yeah, it is. And it is very interesting. So, women within, guys' relationships, as a mother or as a partner in straight relationships, just to say that often they do take on that caregiver role or that primary care provider in the family. And you could say that that's connected to, ideals about femininity and nurture and care. Guys are interesting. They oftentimes are estranged from what's going on for them somatically. So the cardinal sign that brings most guys into emergency rooms is pain and dysfunction, but everything else is kind of taken for granted a lot of times, and they'll just kind of maybe self-monitor, kind of work through things. And oftentimes we'll hear from guys, my wife or my mother, said I needed to come in. So that kind of that affirmation that it's actually okay to seek help, is often a bit of a primer for a lot of guys as well. That estrangement, from help seeking and health care is, you can think about it in a few ways. One is that a lot of guys don't really have a relationship to healthcare because they're not going in for annual checks that might be related to reproductive system, as is the case for a lot of women. I think there's also that self-reliance and that kind of that bravado that we want to be, a bit invincible, and we want to think of ourselves as robust and resilient and able to problem solve our own issues and challenges. So there's a few things there, notwithstanding when guys do get into help, and I think it's a really relevant point that 60% of the guys who suicide had actually been in healthcare prior to dying. It's not as simple sometimes as asking for help. Sometimes those interactions with healthcare providers can be quite complex, and guys might not find the help that they are looking for first time in. And if we lose them to follow up, that estrangement can have really, really significant negative outcomes, by being estranged from healthcare services.
So is it true, if the following statement is true, women are more proactive, males are more reactive? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that guys oftentimes act later on more severe symptoms, and so yes, they're reactive to that. And in terms of saying, yes, no answer, the caveat would be is that there's a lot of complexities in asking for help. And I know that we see guys who are looking for mental health care, and we often say to them, look, it's not a cross-sectional moment. It's not a single ask. You'll need to build a team. You'll need to ask multiple times, and what's working for you this month might not be working for you in 12 months. So again, there is just those complexities with guys because they're often not orientated to the system, and then they're not orientated a lot of times to what constitutes care and how it might be a long game and not a quick fix.
Yeah. So for me, one of the take-home message from this discussion is for guys, try to be more proactive and less reactive. And if you know that a good example is you need to have the shingle vaccine at the age of 50, go and do that.
Right.
Even if your wife is not pushing or your mom is not pushing, go and do that, because that's definitely, there is a lot of science that show that might help you to prevent issue in the future, and don't be reactive too much. I have a follow-up hypothesis about why guys are living shorter than women. And that's, I see it with my friend. I'm above 50 man, and all my friends now bought motorcycles and riding a motorcycle. That's a risky behavior. And I see that most of the women that I interact with don't have motorcycles. So I'm asking, is it possible that part of it is that the males are not only less proactive and more reactive, but also more risk taker? And because you are taking more risk, a lot of time you get injured or die from the behavior that you're doing.
Yeah, so the third leading cause of that disparity in terms of life expectancy between males and females is motor vehicle accident. So it is, it's interesting. And so we see it as one of the biggest killers of young men, because not a lot else is killing them, to be frank, but also that those exposures, those, as you name it, risk taking, they have a higher engagement with those risks men do, that often end in injury and oftentimes fatality. So and in terms of comparison to women, they expose to those risks perhaps more often.
Okay, good. So maybe another take-off message is don't take too much risk and try to take risk in the professional life, but don't take a stupid risk during your leisure time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, sometimes we even see those more benign kind of aspects where guys will get illness through the hyper pursuit of health and performance. So, there's a few caveats to it. I think there's, corporate sport interesting and how guys might align to, those ideals, those masculine ideals of being successful and competitive. And I think that some of that risk taking comes from a place of wanting to prove oneself and prove your manliness and your ability to compete and maybe stand out from the herd, so to speak. And so there's a lot of risks go with that. And of course, the utopia is the professional sports that we see that kind of engage us in that hegemony and those ideals. But, the truth is very few folks make it to that level, but it influences a lot of men's behaviors.
Yeah. If Tom Brady can play football at the age of 45, I can, run a ultra marathon at the age of 65.
Exactly. I mean, he's one of my favorite, absolutely. He gives me great hope that I'm going to be able to continue to get my daily runs in. Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. So I think that this section was very interesting. And now I would like to switch gear and focus on, I think that it's expertise, men's mental health. And to prepare for this episode, we review a bit of statistics related to sex difference in mental health. And we found that internalization disorder are more common in women, while externalization disorder are more common in men. And maybe we'll start by defining what does it mean? What is each of them mean?
So internalizing versus externalizing.
Yes.
So ahead of the podcast, I had a look at the question and I've thought about it a little bit. So I'd offer you an example, and your listeners an example, and that would be that what we find with men in terms of mental health is that they will often internalize what they're feeling. So when there's a transition or a particular event, might be divorce, might be retirement, might be job loss, oftentimes the feelings that go with that transition oftentimes are unexpected, and men tend to look internally for a remedy to deal with whatever emotions they're feeling and trying to make sense of. And oftentimes they do it at a point where they really don't have the resources to do it. So they'll internalize. And one of the ways of concealing a problem is to self-isolate. And guys are very, very good at that. They can kind of isolate from the pack and sort of to deal with their own problem under the pretense of dealing with their own problem. What we find with guys is oftentimes they'll actually go and use substances to get some respite from what they're feeling. So the internalization of problems is one of the issues for guys. The externalizing, and we see this in depression, we see that externalizing of depressive symptoms in men, we believe they show up differently than what we would see in a generic screening tool for depression. We see guys who show up with substance use issues, anger, irritability, over-involvement in sports and work, and risk-taking. And so, that's the externalizing. Oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes, there's something that's going internally for the guy. And so depression is showing up, we believe, quite differently in a lot of men who show up in clinical practice in a way that we might go, oh, that's just how guys are. They drink too much, they're aggressive, when actually it could be depressive symptoms, and a generic screening tool like the PHQ-9 is probably not going to pick that up. But what might pick it up is, a thoughtful consult to kind of get at what some of the transitions might be for the guy and how he's dealing with them.
That's great. And my follow-up question is, what is the magnitude of the mental health problem in men? Is it 10% of the population? Is it 50% of the population? And maybe also, how much of that is underwater, meaning the person have a mental health issue, but he doesn't know and the society does know, so he doesn't seek for help.
Yeah. So, the official stats, I think, probably don't fully show the issue. So I'll give you a sex comparison. Men are diagnosed with depression at half the rate of women, but they suicide at 4 times the rate of women. And so that's what I would class as a discordant relationship. So it's not to suggest that severe depression is the only route to suicide, but it is to say that it's one of the main attributing factors. And so just to say that in terms of the population of men that might be impacted by mental illness, official stats would probably say 10 to 15%. I think, if we thoughtfully considered, depressive symptoms vis-a-vis, full depression, I think we could probably, think that we might be in a higher level. And for the outcomes for have so long been those really dire suicide rates in males, I think, we could agree that we're missing a fair bit in terms of diagnosis upstream to intervene. I'd say the same with anxiety. We often see anxiety show up in different ways with anger and alcohol use, substance use. So again, some of these things they're complex because they don't show up generically, across the sexes. We think there's some differences.
And if we are asking about the symptoms, so what are the symptoms? If I'm a person that not sure if I have a mental health issue or not, what are the symptoms that I should be worried about? And maybe let's move now in parallel to the CMO, Chief Medical Officer of the family, which is the wife or the woman or the mother, what she should look into to understand if her son or a significant other has a mental health issue.
Yeah, ideally in a perfect world, we'd have insights to our behaviors and be able to self-monitor to a point where we knew we were quick to anger, that we might be relying on substances, that might be our go-to, in terms of getting some respite from what we're thinking about, dealing with emotions, those sorts of things, and how it might be impacting people around us, but also how our mood. And we might be caught in ruminations about the past, which is depressive symptoms. And we might be anxious about the future, which is anxiety. And so, uncertainty it manifests as anxiety. So those things, in a self-monitoring way can be really helpful to think about where you are currently, how that aligns with your character, as you know it and typically. And I think partners and women in men's lives are really important for pointing to some of those things because they're often the closest people to the guys, and they are often able to talk to guys about what they're noticing. The caution I have for the women in men's lives who take on that role is that ultimately it's going to be on the guy to self-manage, and that usually involves some professional help when things are advanced, or it might be some mood regulation that the guy's able to sort of engage more independently. But so, we have a lot of caregivers who get caught and fatigued in what's going on for the guy. And I really do caution, caregivers to recognize that you can't do the work that's going to be required of the guy within that context. You can't take it on.
Sure. That's definitely a very interesting information. You said that one of the symptoms is that you worry about the future and anxiety about the future. But I'm looking at myself every day that I wake up. I am worried about zero things. So, what is the level that I should be worried to ask for help, or what is normal? Because this world is tough right now. You have a war in Russia, Ukraine, and you have a recession, and you have a lot of things that people are worried about. So what is the level that I should come and say, oh, I'm worried too much. I need to ask help from professional.
Yeah, it's a great point. So a lot of guys, they work from a platform of discontent or worry, and it actually is a driver and serves them very, very well in a moderate sort of dose, if you like. So the things that worry us also stimulate us to get things done, to think and thoughtfully engage the world. So that can work really well. I think when it isn't helpful is when it's impacting the other parts of your life where your functional abilities start to disappear. So you start to be challenged in the day-to-day. So it's okay to worry and it's okay to be a little bit anxious. Sometimes it gives us the edge or tension that we need to drive a certain productivity. But in the long term, if something's kind of overwhelming us in terms of uncertainty or that kind of rumination on things past, and oftentimes they come together. I think COVID was a perfect example of that. Worried about the future, had too much time to think about the past. So this idea that when it sort of freezes you and you can't move forward with the day-to-day and you're disengaging from relationships, really, really important to start to think about some ways of intervening to help you readjust. And that might be as simple as turning off the media for some guys and just focusing on the day-to-day and the things they can control. But it might be more complex. It might be something more systematic about how they're experiencing all events and their perceptions, and the stress that they're under. And there can be all these collateral issues that are worth unpacking, distressed relationships, job insecurity, financial matters, all things that occurred during COVID and more broadly in life. But certainly there was an amplification of those issues in COVID.
And those symptoms that you described right now, are they different between male and female, or they are pretty similar?
Yeah, so we've published a couple of systematic reviews. A great doctoral student, Christopher Fisher, out of the University of Melbourne, and there is some suggestion here that similarly to depression, anxiety can manifest in men showing up as anger, irritability, substance use, and maybe some risk taking, but certainly the former, So again, just trying to think about the behaviors that we might consider normative in guys that might actually be about anxiety. It's really worth thinking about. If you've got guys in your lives that are showing up and over amplifying those behaviors, it's well worth thinking about whether they might actually be experiencing anxiety down plus or minus depression.
And is it a difference in the age bracket? So, for example, I assume that using substance is more common in the younger adult than older adult. So, is there some symptoms that are more pronounced in younger males than the older males?
As a Longevity by Design podcast listener, you understand the value of improving your health for today and for all the years ahead. And if you want to live your healthiest, longest life possible, you need to understand what's going on inside. At Inside Tracker, we take a personalized approach to health span optimization that eliminates guesswork from your wellness plan. Inside Tracker analyzes blood biomarker and DNA data, along with physiomarker data from fitness trackers like Oura Ring, to deliver personalized food, supplement, lifestyle, and exercise recommendations that allow you to take control and improve your health span. And for a limited time, Longevity by Design listeners can get 20% off at the Inside Tracker store. So if you're ready to receive a personal health analysis and data-driven wellness plan to optimize your body for the long haul, then it's time to start inside. Visit insidetracker.com/podcast to get started today. That's insidetracker.com/podcast to get started today.
Yeah, the substance use in terms of alcohol, the 15 to 34-year age group are probably the ones who are probably, using high levels of binge drinking, higher levels of binge drinking. But it's not to say that can't become a pattern and a chronicity for guys across their lifetime. And oftentimes it can be a go-to, in terms of what's considered a soft landing, but actually exacerbates the problem, the day after coming out of, the substance use. So So yeah, we see different patterns of use, across the ages, but I think the notion of respite and sort of some level of release is probably one of the driving forces for guys. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And my follow-up question is, can you prevent it? Like if you can say what are the best way for a male that either feel that is in a way to have a mental issue, or a male, hopefully like me, that doesn't feel like he have a mental issue, but what should I do in order not to get into this situation? What are the best intervention that someone that is either in the way or currently feel okay to do in order not to get to that situation?
Yeah. I think the health promotion part of it and the prevention are really key things to think about. So thank you for the question. I think that we need to think about, these are go-to. They sound like the everyday, but exercise is absolutely key. So guys tend to like activity. And I think it's critically important that gets built into a routine. And exercise is also a great way of connecting with other people. So guys, you'll see them oftentimes will be shoulder to shoulder, having a conversation. They might be on the 18th tee. They might be running, together, those kind of things where they kind of connect. So I think socially and from a physiological point of view, exercise can be really, really helpful for buoying mood, slowing things down, having a little bit of self-time to contemplate the day and where you're at and where you want to be. And I think those things are important. That things seem so quick these days, everything is very disposable, and, the feeds, the news feeds and the online activity, it's all just the brevity of it. And I think just taking a little bit of time out can be super helpful for guys. We often talk about diet as well. There's a long history of men having quite a passionate relationship with meat, and eating lots of meat and the quick foods, the fuel foods, and they might work for you when you're 20 or in your 30s, that might be okay. But we know that doesn't help in terms of, as you're aging. We know there's got to be adjustments because the metabolism changes, your needs change. So again, it's about getting a bit of a game plan for what makes you feel better, what benefits you can get. The other one I'd just say, in terms of abstinence or in terms of thinking about it, substance use is so interesting. I think for a lot of young men, it kind of is a social elixir. But as time goes on, I think that it can be really quite the opposite. And so again, just thinking about, moderation and some discipline around, substance use, I think is really, really key as well. Those things, as well as being in good relationships, both intimate partner and more widely with friends and family, I think can be really, really key. And avoiding triggers. If something sets you off and gets you down for long periods of time, then I would avoid the trigger, but I'd also look to try and deconstruct what it is about that particular issue with some professional help. I'd just be trying to sort of deconstruct it to a point of understanding it. It's not remedy, but it is, I think understanding is really helpful for guys. We see a lot of guys who maybe, can't quite make sense of their emotions. I think oftentimes because those emotions are discordant, like the idea that you can be regretful and relieved at the same time, things that show up for guys. I think deconstructing some of those emotions can be really helpful in terms of just understanding where things are coming from rather than just expressing them, oftentimes as anger.
Excellent. I really like your answer, specifically about the exercise, the good nutrition, take time for yourself. All of that are well known also for a longevity. So it's not only physical longevity, but it's also mental longevity, which is perfect. So there is no something new, just do the basic, eat well, exercise well, be with friends, and you will have a good mental health, but also physical health, which is amazing.
Yeah. And just to say, I think with guys, a lot of times if you talk to them about being self-reliant in building that into their day, like it takes discipline and it takes a lot of work to get purpose and routine, but guys tend to thrive on it. So building it in, I think it can play to masculine ideals. I think we want to be strong. I think we want to be self-reliant. And that's a way of just building in a lifestyle piece that's it's going to benefit you and the people around you. So even if not for you, do it for someone else. And I think that's a calling card to a lot of guys to sort of adjust. And there has to be adjustments as we get older as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Now let's take an example of a person that drink a lot of alcohol, use a lot of substance, work like crazy, become get into the mental health disorder. Can you explain what happened next? What is the treatment? And let's assume that this person went to an expert and start working on that. What is the roadmap for that? How can this person get out of this situation?
Sure. So the caution and caveat that I'd put forward is to say the longer you sit on those behaviors, the substance use, the overcommitment to work, and the lack of balance in your life, the longer you stay there, the worse the outcome will be in terms of your mental health. So just to say, if this is established and it's a problem that now is not serving you, you're starting to fall down productivity wise, relationships are starting to fall apart, all of the things, that cascading effect that we often see with guys, they'll often lose their job, lose their partner, lose their access to their kids. So this cascading of it. The idea is to get upstream of that if you at all can. If it's gotten to a point where, it's mandated, then you'll probably be, pushed into some level of care and behavior change. Ideally, it's not to that point where there's an ultimatum from a partner or a court mandate that pushes a guy into certain care, but the usual way that it works is guys will go to a general practitioner or family physician. They will have this awkward moment of articulating that things aren't going well, that they're feeling stressed. And stress is a code word that guys use. It means depression. It 100%. So you see.
Okay, so stress is a code name for depression.
Absolutely.
So, all the women that listening to us, when someone a guy tell you stress, it's a depression,
right? Well, or depressive symptoms at least, right? So they'll show up. They'll say, "I've been really stressed," and it's incumbent on the GP, family physician, to pick up on that and then start to talk about services. How could we get you into something specialized to help work through this? A lot of guys love talk therapy. And so this idea that they can start to break down their problems, sit with their emotions, get a little bit of coaching, because it's a great conduit to self-management, which is ultimately what we want. Medications sometimes feature, and for some guys, it takes them further away from the control that they're craving. Nonetheless, there's a place for both those treatment modalities, and they can be concurrent, certainly. So it's just this idea of finding the pathway to the mental health care. And then it's a bit of an audition process, because you might get with a counselor or a psychologist or psychiatrist, and it might not quite be the fit. You might want to be looking for a second or third appraisal and just finding the fit with a person that you can work with. And sometimes about treatment modality, but oftentimes we hear from guys, when they get into therapy, they're like, "Oh, I need to know how much it's going to cost. I need to know how long I'm going to be here. I need to know the milestones to expect." Like, that transparency for guys is massively important to retaining them in the services, to give the help and supply the self-management coaching that they're craving. So again, that's the usual way. The longer and the more severe the mental illness when they arrive, of course, the more work there is to be done, in undoing those behaviors and then getting to where those behaviors are coming from. So just to say, ideally, it would be lovely if we could just be a little bit more proactive and health promotion tilted, for guys in terms of the day to day and just getting coached through some of those things, because there's a lot of everyday stuff that we just assume that doesn't trouble guys. And what we find is transitions for guys tend to accumulate over their life, and eventually you're going to have to deal with it.
I'm still stuck with the stress that for you it's equal to basically I'm depressed. So I have a follow-up question about that. Is it the same for women? So when a woman said I'm stressed, that say that it's depressed, or women are having a completely different code?
Yeah. So I'm not really able to say 100%, about the linguistics of it or the semantics of how women would show up and say that they were experiencing some depression. But a lot of times what we might see in a generic depression is this introspection, these tears, this overflow of emotion. And so that might be articulated as I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm not coping. Perhaps there's some semantics rather, that might be articulated differently by women. I don't know that for sure. That's not an empirical no, but just to say, I'm convinced that guys use stress as code for depressive symptoms.
Yeah, that's good to know. Absolutely. And a question about mental health and the distribution in the population via the aging process. So do you see more mental health issues when you become older, or it's distributed more or less the same for young guys, middle age and old age? What do you see?
Yeah, I think the official stats would suggest that it's younger men are more likely to be diagnosed. That's how I'd put it. I think that there's perhaps less resistance and to help seeking that might help guys at younger ages get diagnosed with severe mental illness. I think as time goes on, there might be some patterns where we don't see quite the number of guys getting diagnosed, but there might be a few explanations for that, including, that notion of functional mental illness where guys are surviving, without particular formal diagnoses or treatments.
Okay. And before that, you mentioned that people that are exercising more, or people that have a better nutrition, or men that have exercise more, have a better nutrition, that have more free time, most likely will have less mental health issues. And we know that, or at least I know from what we've seen in the literature, that there is correlation between education and social economic level and those. Do you see the correlation by that? Someone that is in lower social economic bracket have more mental health issue than someone from higher socioeconomic bracket?
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised it. So, in Canada, I think one of the things we hang our hat on is the social determinants of health. And we do that in order to describe, health inequities. So within the category of men, there are some guys who are definitely living in marginalizing conditions. And I can give you an example. We did some work in the downtown east side of Vancouver where many of the guys are of Indigenous ancestry and battle with housing insecurity, poverty, and substance use. And it was so interesting. We did a study with these guys. They were dads, not all directly connected to their children, but they were dads. And we wanted to build something around physical activity for them, in the downtown east side. And it's so interesting. They didn't want anything to do with physical activity because they were actually going between welfare services. They were walking 15 Ks a day to these different services, they didn't need exercise, and exercise wasn't recreational for them. Like they were actually doing the work of welfare. So it's just a great poignant reminder that, when we talk about exercise and we talk about diet and eating the right things and getting exercise, great reminder that the access issues for subgroups of men who are suffering inequities is really tough. You can prescribe that like it's available to everybody and doesn't cost too much. But the truth is for some groups, it's actually there's real barriers to getting to those resources, which of course amplifies the issues and the risk for mental illness.
Yeah, and if you think about it, those people also most likely live in a downtown or a location that are actually food deserts. So it's very hard for them to find a good food. It's very hard for them to find a park. It's very hard for them to find the time to exercise because they are working a few different jobs. So it's definitely a vicious circle that's very hard to get out of.
Yeah, I agree. And there is that emergence too, with high inflation rates, the working poor, where the things that a wage or salary might have bought you in terms of lifestyle, dwindling because of inflation. So again, it's not to conflate inequities with groups who are working, and got access, but it is to say that you can be relatively poor, in terms of access to things that would advance your health. And there's, it's been documented for a long time that those disadvantages manifest in earlier morbidities and mortalities.
Yeah. Yeah. So one, I think that a wonder word for males is testosterone. Everyone that hear testosterone, hear the name testosterone, get very excited because testosterone is the mainly hormone. It's allow you to build muscle. It's increase your sex drive. Is basically it's almost the wonder drug for males. And I would like to hear from you some elaboration about what is the connection between testosterone level, if at all, and mental health. Do we see that males that have lower testosterone have more mental health issues, or the vice versa? What do you see?
Yeah, so I can give you an example. There's some good work by Leo Scher, who's on the east of America. And Leo suggests that low levels of testosterone in males and also high levels of testosterone in males can be used to explain depression. So low levels, the guy's kind of down, flat, hasn't got energy, so, shows up as depression. High levels, aggression, dysfunction, so can show up also as depression. So there's been some work. I would class it as interesting work and important work to think about in the context of some of the biologies, that might underpin, different mental health challenges for guys. I don't think it's the explanatory note in like the overarching, explanatory note. I think there's more than one explanation and probably a combination. But I don't mind his work because he does point to the biology, the potential for biology of it, but he gives a nod to the social constructions around how that might interact with the biologies as well. So a long answer to just say, testosterone does feature. I think one of the things that we've seen as well is that because it's like the utopia of, this will elevate your mood and this will help your sex drive. I think in some ways it's probably been a tough sell because of course you can get synthetic testosterone and get supplements. And again, there's been this back and forth about, whether that's good use of that. And from a marketing perspective and, the hijinks of pharmacy, potentially just coming to the fore. So it's an emergent field. I wouldn't not consider, the implications of testosterone and reducing testosterone in aging males. Yeah, it's something that's out there. It's not our core work, but it's certainly something we're aware of.
Okay, excellent. And speaking about testosterone, there is a term that I heard a lot when we done the research about mental health, that's masculinities. So can you define this term and explain to our audience what does it mean?
Yeah. So masculinities in the plural, I think has been really helpful because it's broken with the ideal that guys are hardwired a certain way to always show up as the risk taker, the invincible guy, who's swirling alcohol and making an aggressive way through life. I think it's masculinities are the social constructions of what it is to be a man. So how do we embody what it is to be a man? Where do we get those values from? And oftentimes they are learnt. So our exposures to parents, to friends, the ways of the world, the discourses about what it is to be a man, they tend to get taken on. And I think especially by young fellas when they're kind of growing up, wanting to sort of prove manliness, they'll take on things that they see. And that might be strength, stoicism, self-reliance as three S's that might be, front and forward. And so the guys show less emotions. They might take on that stoic, strong, controlling kind of personality because they equate that with what it is to be a man. And that can prevail across guys' lives. You can see that in certain characters across time. The whole idea of the masculinities piece is that we know that those caricatures or those, what we would call states, rather than fixed traits, they change over time and they change in terms of context. So how a guy shows up in a medical consultation where he's out of his depths and he's really quite unfamiliar with what he's asking for and the services he's going to get might be completely different to when he's with his football team and he's been playing with them for years and he knows everybody and he's quite relaxed. There might be some very different kind of performativities around how he is as a man in those situations. So it's just to open up the idea that there's more than one way of being a man. And so when guys rigidly align to being stoic, strong, and self-reliant, you can see how it would quite potentially get in the way of doing help. You might hide a problem, conceal it. You might be reticent to seek any help because you should be able to be self-reliant in your problem solving. So again, it's trying to relax those categories to make it a little bit more open because we see lots of variations on how it is to be a guy these days. So, there's much more relaxation around what it is. And so in many parts of the world, so there's this inclusive masculinity, the idea that we include guys who are oftentimes othered, like subgroups, like via race, via minority sexual identity, so there's less of that. There's more of an openness. And that's what, I think it's really important for health, that we buy in and that we role model it because, those divisions that were historically set up by traditional masculinities, they were pretty harsh on a lot of men and a lot of women and families.
So how it's influenced a relationship, a personal and a professional relationship. Also, how males are intimate comparing to women, and lastly, about family. What is the effect of that on all of that?
Yeah, so we've done some work with guys who went through relationship breakups, intimate partner relationship breakups, and also, guys who told us what it was to have an equitable, sustainable, partner relationship. It's been fascinating. So just to summarize that work briefly in answer to your question, is to say that masculinity is interesting how it oftentimes it will drive a problem within a relationship toward the idea that it should be handled in-house. So that sort of sanctity of relationships, intimate partner relationships, guys will often try and either solve it with their partner or withdraw from the problem in some way, denying that its existence. Or they might get caught in the conflict, and just that rupture of conflict that continues. And so it's super interesting that all of those are masculine states, and they're relational. So try to work through that. And where guys don't tend to show up is in comfortability with, couples counseling or counseling like a third party to try and, reduce the distress in a relationship. So it's very, very interesting that a lot of guys will withdraw, get caught in conflict. And so I think it's an interesting point in history. We've never had more relationship breakdowns, I don't think, in history other than like post-COVID and through COVID. I think there was a lot of pressure on the domestic sphere, during that time with the lockdowns and social distancing, physical distancing. I think it put a lot of pressure. And so again, it's just to shout it out as an issue, and it's directly related to men's mental health and women's. But just to say, a guy who separates plus or minus divorces, in that first 12 months when he separates, he's 8 times more likely than the woman to suicide. Like it's a real, so we often talk about relationships as somehow different to health. I think there's really solid evidence that the opposite is true. It's so embedded in the day-to-day health and longevity of guys. Their relationships are so important, especially their intimate partner relationship. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I might have gone off on tangent.
No, absolutely. That was a very good answer. And actually, I've seen it around me that during COVID, it's either the relationship between the couple become better or they actually terminated it. But it's almost half and half. I've seen so many couples that got divorced during COVID because think about it, a male executive that was traveling every week and coming only over the weekend, suddenly he need to take care of the dishwasher and he need to cook and he need to take care of the kids. Then he wake up at night and cannot go out with the guys drink in the hotel. Suddenly his life is different. They say, what the heck I'm doing with this lady? I don't know her, something like that. So I think in my opinion, COVID was actually a catalyst of making something much faster. The feeling that you had, but actually you have been inside as you said, isolated with your spouse for either 2 years. And then you had to decide, am I staying there or am I leaving? I don't have any other options.
Well, it's true. They're keen observations. The pressure on the domesticities and the domestic sphere. I can't recall another point in history where there was that kind of pressure. Because it was a transition. A lot of people and guys included, didn't have that public out-facing kind of job or identity. That was gone. Everything reverted to Zoom. It changed the nature of our interactions. We work harder at communication when we're on Zoom, like 3 times harder. So there's a whole bunch of transitions. And in many ways, I talk about it as a perfect storm, where you had these multiple transitions. It wasn't just you, it was your partner. It was all of these things happening in and around you, not to mention the economic upheavals that are still coming down the pipe now. So those transitions, they changed the nature of work. So not to belabor COVID, but just to say, perfect storm for some of the things that we had taken for granted or that were so entrenched as our identities, our relations, and our roles were at best stopped, but really disrupted, in terms of how we knew the day-to-day of doing life.
Yeah. So John, this was a fascinating discussion. And usually at the end of the episode, I used to ask a question about top tips for improving health span. But with you, because we discuss about mental health, so what is your top tip of improving mental health span, specifically for guys? What would you say is the most important tip to maintain a good mental health?
Just one?
You can have 2.
I can have 2. It's a bonus day. Okay, I'll give you one of mine. I do a 5-song run pretty much every day. And I'm not breaking any land speed records, but one of the best things and one of the most under-mentioned aspects of a 5-song run is the walk back. It's the warm down. when you can start to just think through your day and just unpack it and just ease it into a slowness that is considered. Well, I think it's paramount to get outside. I think whether it's raining or not, because in sunny Vancouver, we get a little bit of rain. So just to say, I think that routine can be really helpful. And it might be a walk, it might just be getting out amongst getting a forest, whatever. It just something that is a routine, that is something for you and a bit of thinking time. That would be number one for me. Number two would be, I just really encourage guys to think about their relationships in a way that they think about equity. And equity in a relationship is usually about knowing your partner well enough to know what they need and how to show up in a positive way in the relationship. But it's also articulating what you need in terms of the relationship in a way that is proactive and in a way that engages. It sounds pretty simple, but what we hear from guys is that when they build that in routinely to their relationships as a conversation that happens every fortnight or every month, they are infinitely better equipped to reap the benefits of the relationship. And I just think it's really wise counsel. So we heard that from guys who'd broken up. We heard it from guys in relationships that had sustained. I just think oftentimes we're blinded to the simplicity of it, but I think it's so important.
Yeah, that was a couple of great tips, and I really appreciate it. And definitely it was unique because we are talking about mental health. I would like to finish by thank you, John, for joining us today. It was a fascinating discussion, focus on male health and specifically male mental health. And we look forward to explore the research in the field of longevity each month with you and the leading scientists. For more information, please go to www.insidetracker.com/podcast. Again, thank you so much, John. It was a real pleasure to speaking with you today.
Thanks so much. Really enjoying it.
Thanks for listening to Longevity by Design. Please subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Longevity by Design is powered by Inside Tracker, a personalized health optimization platform that helps people improve their lives by improving their bodies from the inside out using personalized, science-backed recommendations for nutrition, supplements, and lifestyle changes. To learn more, visit insidetracker.com/podcast.